The Odyssey symbolism. The first one is the sea. The sea can be helpful because it can get Odysseus home, but oftentimes it keeps him from getting home. So in that case, it symbolizes being fickle and being inconsistent. And the explanation is that it can send really good and negative things, blessings like the wind, to get Odysseus home on his boat, but then it also brings suffering and obstacles because the storms keep Odysseus from getting home. The second aspect in the symbolism worksheet is Odysseus's bow. So it's a symbol of kingship and strength because Odysseus was the only one who could string the bow, and he, in that case, had earned the right back to his kingdom because Penelope had said that whoever can string the bow can be the king, and then the only one who was able to do that was Odysseus himself, while the other suitors were too weak to try to string the bow. The third aspect is Argos. So Argos has two types of symbolism tied to him. So the first one is loyalty, because he's a pet dog and he was unconditionally loyal to Odysseus. And at the end, when he finally sees Odysseus for the first time, after 20 years, he shuts his eyes and he passes away. It also symbolizes the living circumstances of Ithaca because Argos was abandoned and he wasn't really taken care of. So just like how Odysseus had left Ithaca, there was no one there to govern the islands and govern the people there. So it reflects the living circumstances of all the citizens and even the town itself, that it was really run down, and that the kingdom had declined because of that. The third aspect is Odysseus and Penelope's marriage bed. It's an object that symbolizes faithfulness because Odysseus and Penelope stayed faithful to each other, and with their marriage vows, Penelope didn't choose any of the suitors to replace her husband, and then Odysseus made his way back home so that he can return to his wife Penelope, and even turns down the idea and the concept of being immortal when given that opportunity by Calypso. It's the bed is also made from the roots of an olive tree, so it's still growing, and then Odysseus actually carved and made that bed himself. Since it can't be moved because it's grown from the roots of a tree, it symbolizes its constant and strong love between Penelope and Odysseus, that their love cannot be moved. The next aspect is the olive tree. So that is Athena's symbol that represents her. She's the goddess of wisdom and courage and inspiration, law and justice, war, strategy, and skill. And we see this numerous times pop up within the story, with Odysseus defeating the Cyclops by using the pike of olive, which came from the olive tree. A big branch for some reason was in the cave to help Odysseus out. And then the last one for symbolism is Ithaca. This is Odysseus' islands and home, and he fights his way and encounters many obstacles to get home. So it's a place that symbolizes hope as well as home. It's the final destination for Odysseus to return home to his family, and that is where he is really determined to get to. That's what drives him and motivates him to get back. Okay, so moving on to the next worksheet, which is Odysseus's choices. So when you think back to certain instances where Odysseus makes choices with all the adventures in the Odyssey, he portrays part of his character and his traits. So we'll think about what they indicate about who he is as a person. Okay, so the first obstacle is Calypso's islands and Calypso. So here, Odysseus makes a choice to stay with Calypso and take immortality, take that opportunity to be an immortal just like her, or he can return home to his wife. So he makes a choice to return home to his wife and his son. So it shows that he still loves his wife and his son, Telemachus, and he still tries to maintain his honor as a husband, and he's, trying to stay faithful to his wife. And he, wants to accept responsibility for being a father. It shows us, as readers, that Odysseus is saying true love is better than immortality, because in this case, he really didn't love Calypso. I mean, she was keeping him from getting home and keeping him trapped on her island, but he didn't love her, and he really, really loved Penelope instead, and he chose love over immortality. The next obstacle is the Cyclops. So this indicates a negative side for Odysseus, because he has the choice to keep quiet about his name. Remember, he gave a fake name and he said his name was Nobody, which really showed Odysseus's intelligence. However, when they were all leaving the island of the Cyclops, he was taunting Polyphemus, and he even gave his real name and where he lived. So that shows that he's arrogant. Even when his men were telling Odysseus, like, hey, leave him alone, stop bothering him, we're already out. But Odysseus was still taunting him, and in the end, it cost him a lot of time and a lot of energy, because that's what really kept him from going home as well. It was Poseidon keeping him away from his family. So that was a really bad choice that Odysseus made there. The next one is Circe's prophecy. So Circe had warned Odysseus that all his men will die, and then he's going to be the only survivor of the journey. He gets the same warning from Tiresias when he goes down to the underworld, but the first one to indicate this was Circe herself, and it shows that Odysseus is being selfish and he only cares about his well-being. So instead of telling his men, hey, it's been foretold to me by Circe and also from Tiresias that I would be the only one to survive this whole journey, and I would be the only one to get home. So instead of dying with his men, he chooses, to keep that a secret and for him to get home while all his other men die. Which is sad, because all those other men were really loyal to him, and they did everything they could to, stay together and fight for Odysseus. But in the end, he only chooses himself and his own life, and instead of the many men who risked their lives for him, because they also did that when they went to Troy to fight in the Trojan War. They risked their lives for Odysseus and this army. Okay, so the next one is the return to Ithaca. This is the last one. So Odysseus makes a really smart move here. He makes a smart choice. Instead of, showing up to Ithaca as he is, he plays along with, Athena's idea of being disguised as a beggar. He kind of tricks his way back into the palace to stay alive, and then to trick the other suitors that were there. So he outsmarted them again, like he's really intelligent, and he's really cunning, and he's really clever. And that shows that, he, can be a good person. Um, he needs to stay alive, and he needs to keep his kingdom. And he wants to see his wife Penelope. I mean, we could also say here that his return to Ithaca was also full of revenge and hatred and anger, because he didn't spare any lives of the suitors. So, you could say he made a good choice when he disguised himself. It shows that he's smart. But then you could also say that he made a poor choice by having no mercy on any of the suitors, and he decided to kill them all in the end. So that shows something about his character. Okay, and then the last worksheet is on the topics in the Odyssey. So we're looking at the author's message, or the big idea about life and about human nature. The first one is hospitality. So hospitality is really important to ancient Greeks. And everywhere Odysseus has traveled, he looks for hospitality for he and his men. He talks about this mostly in the instance with the Cyclops, when he says, like, this is how you treat, strangers. You eat them, or you make them suffer, because you remember Cyclops was eating all of Odysseus' men, and Odysseus was just like, I can't believe you're doing this. You're supposed to be hospitable, and you're supposed to be, kind to visitors, but he wasn't. So it's a big deal to the ancient Greeks. So it's a big theme that comes along in the story. But really, the only place that kind of welcomes him, you can say, is his home in Ithaca, with his old, friend, the swineherd, Eumaeus. We also see that he has been given hospitality by King Alcinous, where he tells his whole story about trying to get home, and then King Alcinous also helps Odysseus reach his home by, loaning him like a boat and all that. So, big deal to the ancient Greeks. The second topic, or second theme, that we can look at is vengeance. So this concept of vengeance is throughout the entire story, because Odysseus has vengeance when he blinds the Cyclops, and then the Cyclops has vengeance when he tells his father Poseidon to help him or help avenge him by not getting Odysseus home, preventing him from reaching home. And then we also see that Odysseus has vengeance on all the suitors who tries to steal his kingdom and try to steal his wife. And then those suitors, they all die. So what we learn at the end of the story, though, is that vengeance doesn't gain very much at the end. And it's really a bad thing. The third one is bravery and honor. So Odysseus and his men, they have bravery and honor because they fought in the Trojan War, but then they also went through all these other obstacles, trying to get home. And, when time came for them to be brave and to be courageous was, really when they fought the Cyclops. And then that instance with Scylla and Charybdis, with the sea monster and the whirlpool, that was when Odysseus was delivering his speech to the men, who was just like, I've been there with you, and, we need to fight through this, and I was with you when we defeated the Cyclops, so, you guys need to be brave. Really important to epic poetry to the Greeks. The fourth one is adventure. So this teaches us that great adventures can lead to setbacks, but it can also lead to triumphs at the end, because it brings experience for anyone who goes on a journey. and then it rewards those people at the end who have that courage and have that determination to continue. I mean, unfortunately, the men in the story, Odysseus' men in the story, didn't get to go home, but they still had a great adventure, you can argue. The fifth one is brains over brawn. So intelligence and ingenuity are superior to strength because we see Odysseus outsmart Polyphemus because Polyphemus was big and he was really strong, but Odysseus had used his intelligence and his wit to, outsmart Polyphemus and escape the cave. So that is a huge storyline there where it's brains over brawn. But we also know that Odysseus was the one who invented the idea of the Trojan horse, and the Trojans lost that big war to the Greeks when the Trojan horse had entered the city of Troy, and then all the Greek soldiers, got out of the Trojan horse, and then they burned the city down and slaughtered the citizens. So, the sixth one is fidelity. Fidelity means being faithful. So Odysseus remains faithful to Penelope because he refuses Calypso's offer of immortality, and then Penelope also remains faithful to Odysseus because she doesn't choose any suitors. She doesn't choose to marry another man. And then you can also say that the Penelope and Odysseus' love for each other, is the underlying motivator for Odysseus to get home to his family and get home to Ithaca. So fidelity is a really big part of the story. Which brings us to family love. So Odysseus refuses all these temptations that would keep him away from his wife and his son, which shows that his love for his family is better than, all the superficial things like glory and conquest and wealth and riches and immortality. And then when he returns back to Ithaca, he even joins forces with his son Telemachus, because at this point Telemachus is an adult male now. So Telemachus, gets together with his father and they fight the suitors. Good bonding moment, you could say. The eighth one is taking risks. Odysseus isn't afraid to take risks and to fail because he learns from all of them. And then he wants to learn and he wants to know more about the world and its ways than to be content and be at home. He's all about being courageous, but taking those risks to see, what would happen. Another big part of the story. The next one is perseverance. So Odysseus never gives up trying to get home. He encounters many, many obstacles, but he's still determined, still motivated to get home. This big, idea of perseverance is there. It also shows when Penelope never gives up on Odysseus as well. I mean, she waits 20 years for him to come home, and instead of replacing him with another man, choosing another suitor, finding another king, she waits it out, and she, has that dedication and that perseverance to be patient, and she has that hope that that her husband will return. And then reflecting that, Telemachus also never gives up his search for his father. I mean, he went to Pylos and he went to Sparta to try to search for his dad. Pylos and Sparta are also part of Greece, and those nations had fought in the Trojan War. So when the Trojan War was over, he, everyone went home except for Odysseus and his men. And so the only way to find out, what happened to Odysseus and his men was to go to the other nations and get some information. That is what Telemachus did. Like, he just traveled around trying to get clues, as to where he can find his dad. So he never gives up on his dad as well. And the last one is loyalty. So, mentioned before, Argos remains loyal to Odysseus, and he waits for Odysseus to return home before he closes his eyes and he passes away. And then Odysseus and Penelope remain loyal to each other because, they never, remarried, I guess you can say, like another person. Odysseus deflects all of Calypso and Circe's advances. He doesn't stay with them. He wants to come home to Penelope, and then Penelope doesn't choose another husband. She remains loyal to her husband. And then Telemachus also remains loyal to his father. Telemachus chooses to fight alongside his dad, so that they can defeat the suitors and, reclaim the kingdom to them. Okay, so that is the end of this. Thank you for listening.